Good afternoon, and welcome to Capital Harmonia's 7th Annual Women's Choral Festival. We are so happy to be back in person this year and so grateful for your support. We are also excited to be joined by some friends on our YouTube live stream. This afternoon, we will share pieces from women composers and poets that celebrate the many facets of women's experience. Please sit back and enjoy Phenomenally Woman. Suffrage Cantata captures the struggle for the right to vote among the women who led it. The composer, Dr. Andrea Ramsey, has over 100 publications to her credit, this one being one of the most extensive. The 5 movements take the audience through social practices and conditions women were subject to. Movement 1, It Is Coming, the lecturing, lobbying, and petitioning of the suffragists. Movement 2, Failure is Impossible, the marches and parades that took place across the United States. Movement 3, A Woman's Place, the imprisonment, prison abuse, and forced feedings that were endured. Movement 4, Shall Not Be Denied. And finally, the ratification of the 19th Amendment, Movement 5, Forward into Light. Capital Harmonia does recognize that at times our 2 white soloists will be singing words of the women of color. We ask that you kindly hold your applause until the end of the entire work. We present Dr. Andrea Ramsey's Suffrage Cantata.
Of the 24 United States, half were slave states. Of the 2 million enslaved, half were women. For those women not enslaved, voting, speaking in public, preaching in church, and a formal education were not permitted. When a woman married, usually at a young age, her property became her husband's. Her body was not hers to control. She was expected to bear many children and raise them while tending to the labors of a 19th century household. options. She could be a teacher, seamstress, housekeeper, or mill worker, but she would be paid 1/3 what men in the same positions were paid, yet expected to pay taxes in full. Even what she earned was not her own, as her husband could collect her wages from her employer at any time. Legally, she was her husband's property. If he beat her, she had no recourse. If he abused her, she could not divorce him. If he wanted a divorce, he could take her children and leave her destitute. Rights movement of the 1800s came to life in the ancestral home of the Haudenosaunee, dubbed Iroquois by French and English settlers. This land, called the state of New York after colonization, was home to a variety of women's lived experiences. Middle-class white women aired the frustration of their constrained realities to one another. Elizabeth Cady Stanton, who would go on to be a leader in the women's rights movement, described attending a small tea party of disgruntled women, where in addition to serving tea, she also poured out the torrent of her long accumulating discontent. Meanwhile, Black women were living in a state that had just ended slavery. Full emancipation arrived in 1827 for New Yorkers. Women like Harriet Jacobs and Sojourner Truth had both endured the torture of slavery and were now sharing their personal stories as activists for abolition and supporters of women's rights. And the women of the 6 indigenous nations of the Haudenosaunee were living in communities that modeled women's equality to men. They owned property, had a voice in religious life, nominated leaders, and removed them if necessary. Some early women's rights leaders had interactions with the Haudenosaunee, including Matilda Jocelyn Gage, who was adopted into the Wolf Clan of the Mohawk Nation and given a name meaning "she who holds the sky." Charlotte Woodward, 19 years old. At first, we traveled quite alone, but before we had gone many miles, we came on other wagon loads of women bound in the same direction. At different crossroads, we saw wagons coming from every part of the country, and before we reached Seneca Falls, we were a procession. When Charlotte's wagon reached the first Women's Right Convention in Seneca Falls, over 300 people were there, including 40 men who were permitted inside but not allowed to speak for the first day. When Elizabeth Cady Stanton presented the Declaration of Rights and Sentiments, her voice was so quiet that many struggled to hear her. The document, modeled after the Declaration of Independence, contained 11 resolutions to be voted on the following day. All resolutions passed easily, except the one Stanton had authored alone, which called for the enfranchisement of women. One man stood to defend the resolution. His name was Frederick Douglass, and after he spoke, it passed by 2 votes. 1853, Broadway Tabernacle, New York. Sojourner Truth had endured much in her life.
We have been long enough trodden
But she refused to let her life's light be determined by the darkness that surrounded her.
but we will have our race. See if we don't. See if you can. See if you can. It is coming. It is coming. One day.
3 years after Seneca Falls, Elizabeth Cady Stanton became friends with a woman whose name would one day be synonymous with women's suffrage, Susan B. Anthony. Susan was unmarried and able to travel and lecture while Elizabeth was busy tending to many children at home. A partnership was formed, or as Elizabeth put it, I forged the thunderbolts and Susan fired them. On November 5th, 1872, Anthony voted illegally, setting into motion a plan she hoped would eventually gain the women's vote. The 14th Amendment contained ambiguous language. Stanton and Anthony hoped it could be exploited for the cause of women's suffrage. If all persons born in the United States were citizens, didn't that include women? Weren't women citizens? Seeing an ad in a Rochester paper that encouraged registration for the upcoming election, Susan took her 3 sisters and 11 other women down to the local barber shop. At first, they were ignored and then asked to leave, But when Susan read the 14th Amendment to the registrars and threatened to sue, the men surprisingly agreed. They were convinced that by Susan's promise that she would pay their fines if the government ever came after them. Her act of voting became a national story, yet 13 days later, a federal marshal knocked at her door. Seemingly embarrassed, he indicated Susan was to be arrested and should come downtown, but no rush. Susan insisted that if he believed her to be a criminal, he should arrest her just as he would any man. She went to change, and upon returning, presented her wrist to the officer for handcuffing. He would not cuff her, but did accompany her. As they boarded the trolley, the driver asked for her fare, and she announced loudly enough for every passenger to hear that she was traveling at the expense of the federal government. Pointing at the marshal, she said, After her lawyer bailed her out of jail, Susan B. Anthony spent months before her trial delivering a lecture titled, "Is it a crime for the citizen of the United States to vote?" She gave this lecture in all 29 towns in Monroe County and convinced so many people of her reasoning that the prosecution had to move the case to a neighboring county. United States versus Susan B. Anthony took place in June of 1873 and lasted 2 days, with an all-white, all-male jury and a judge who had written his decision before any evidence was presented. It was hardly a fair trial. Susan had not been allowed to speak until the final day, when the judge ordered her to stand and asked, "Has the prisoner anything to say why sentence shall not be pronounced?" The judge ordered Susan B. Anthony to sit down, something you would have to do 6 separate times before she was finished. And he sentenced her to pay a fine of $100 plus the cost of prosecution. But Susan had thoughts on that. Susan B. Anthony kept her word to the judge. She never paid the $100 fine for as long as she lived. Traveling in frozen rail cars, bone-jarring carriages, and often being refused hotel rooms because she was alone, she tirelessly lectured, lobbied, and petitioned, devoting her entire life to the cause of women's rights. She encouraged younger women to try their wings, as she put it, by cultivating their writing and speaking abilities. And though she did not live to see the day women could vote, she knew that day would come. In the year of her passing at age 86, she was still inspiring those who would carry her banner forward.
I stayed in Susan B. Anthony's house at a speaking engagement in Rochester. The next morning she had some errands in town, so she said I could use her stenographer.
Ida B. Wells Barnett was born in Mississippi 6 months before the Emancipation Proclamation. After losing both parents and a sibling to yellow fever, she convinced the school board in Memphis that she was 18 years old so she could be hired as a teacher and provide for her younger siblings. 8 years later, Ida was fired from teaching for writing about school corruption in a newspaper column. A talented writer, Ida decided to start her own newspaper. Ida's paper grew to be a successful endeavor. She boldly called out white supremacy and shined the light of truth on the horrors of lynching in the South. But when her friends who owned a grocery business were lynched, and she published that their lynchings were because they were economically successful black men, an angry white mob destroyed her newspaper building while she was away on a trip. Armed men waited outside her home to kill her, and friends warned her that she could not return to Memphis. So Ida fled to Chicago.
The stenographer never ventured upstairs. I simply assumed she was occupied. But when Susan B. Anthony got back from town, the mood intensified, and downstairs she went swiftly to ask the stenographer why she did not show.
The stenographer told Susan B. Anthony that she would not take dictation from a woman of color.
Susan B. Anthony stilled her gaze, and she spoke calm and low. An insult to my guest is an insult to me. Come get your bonnet and go.
An activist on multiple fronts, Ida fought to help women gain the right to vote in Illinois and confronted white women who ignored women of color in the movement. A founding member of the NAACP, she established the Alpha Suffrage Club and lectured internationally. Taking on injustice was a lifelong pursuit for Ida. Even as a teacher in the South, she sued the railroad when they forcibly removed her from her car.
A woman's place is a clean train car. I paid 30 cents for my ticket. When the conductor tried to put me in the smoking car, I told him, sir, I won't go in it. And when he tried to move me, I bit his hand. He did hard enough, he had to get another man. $100. Yes, white women need the ballot, but my women even more. I'd like to buy a railroad ticket and choose my own car. When the men try to put you where you don't belong, you square your jaw and fix your geese, 'cause a woman's place is the seat she bought when a woman knows her place.
March 1913, the staging grounds near the Capitol filled with women finding their places. Washington, D.C. was about to experience a parade like no other. Horses neighed, wagons creaked, and musicians warmed up. Women marching was a radical idea. Men marched, not women. But the parade organizers, Alice Paul and Lucy Burns, wanted to show how power did not rest only with men. They also knew this was the perfect day, given Woodrow Wilson's inauguration was the next day, and there would be lots of press in town. Inez Milholland led the charge. Riding a white horse and a gold tiara, she would forever be known as the Joan of Arc of suffrage. Behind her, the first wagon of the parade bore a massive banner stating the women's demands. There were 8,000 women on Pennsylvania Avenue in academic gowns and work uniforms. There were banners from almost every state, including a delegation from Illinois, the state that Ida B. Wells had traveled from Chicago to join. Unfortunately, Illinois, like many states, wanted only white women in their delegation. These states worried that Southern voters would not support suffrage if black women were seen marching alongside. Ida was asked to march at the back of the parade with the rest of the black women. At 52 years old and having done more for suffrage than most of white Illinois delegates, she was incensed. Wounded but determined to take her rightful place, she did not go to the back, but instead waited on the sidelines. And when Illinois marched by, Ida stepped out of the crowd, linked arms with two allies near the front, and marched the entire rest of the parade.
We all believe in the idea of democracy. Women's suffrage is the application of democracy to women. Mabel Pingwali, suffragist, and the first Chinese woman to earn a doctorate in the United States. When the doorkeeper got up to let Mabel Vernon sit down, her friend joked it was because she looked pregnant. Indeed, Mabel had secretly pinned a large banner under her skirts. President Woodrow Wilson was giving his December address to Congress, and at the opportune moment, Mabel unfurled the yellow sateen, dropping it over the balcony with the help of her friends. A murmur rustled through the floor, but in this moment and in subsequent meetings, Woodrow Wilson remained unmoved. Harriet Stanton Blatch floated a new idea, the silent sentinels, an unceasing presence of women at the White House gates, with message banners in the suffrage colors of purple, yellow, and white. This would be radical. Labor pickets were one thing, but to take up a grievance with the president? No one had ever picketed the White House like this before. The first line of sentinels arrived in January of 1917.
Mr. President, what will you do for women's suffrage? How long must women wait for liberty?
The sentinels kept watch through all of winter, and apart from the occasional insult, things had been fairly calm. But when the U.S. entered World War I in April, picketing a wartime president was seen as unpatriotic. The banners were sharply worded, calling out the president and envoys from other countries. Angry mobs threw rocks and eggs. Banners were torn, and women were shoved, kicked, and dragged across the pavement. For the next 2 years, almost 500 women would be arrested on ludicrous charges, such as obstructing traffic or kneeling on public ground. And as the women persisted, the prison sentences grew even longer.
How long must women be denied the voice?
When the leader of the National Women's Party, Alice Paul, was sentenced to 7 months in the district jail, she wrote her mother not to worry, reassuring her it would merely be a delightful rest. But Alice's reality in prison would be far from delightful. Before her sentence was over, Alice would be subjected to a foul-smelling cell. Meals of worm-ridden pork, placed in solitary confinement, deprived of sleep, and ultimately moved to the psychopathic ward, having her mental fitness questioned. Alice went on hunger strike to protest the horrible conditions. 3 times a day she was strapped down, a tube shoved up her nose, and milk and raw eggs funneled down her throat. Fellow suffragist Rose Winslow endured the same treatment, smuggling out details of their conditions on scraps of paper. If the Wilson administration thought they would weaken the suffragists by torturing their leader, they were undoubtedly surprised on November 10th, when the longest picket line yet appeared outside the White House. Over 30 women were arrested, including Lucy Burns, who helped form the National Women's Party with Alice Paul. All of them were sent to the Occoquan workhouse, away from Alice in the district jail. The women were greeted upon arrival by the workhouse superintendent and up to 40 angry men wielding clubs. Women were beaten, choked, and violently thrown into cells, some knocked unconscious. Lucy Burns' hands were tied over her head. Her clothes stripped off, she was left only with a blanket. Calling out to the others, she was threatened with a gag and straitjacket. One woman had a heart attack. When the others cried for help, the guards ignored their pleas. This evening would be known as the Night of Terror. As many as 30 women would go on hunger strikes in protest of their horrible treatment in prison, many enduring forced feedings, just as Alice Paul had. The administration, faced with negative press and women who could not be broken, released all the suffrage prisoners by the end of November. Upon their release, Alice Paul proclaimed, "We are put out of jail as we were put in, at the whim of government. They tried to terrorize us. They could not, so they freed us." The Susan B. Anthony Amendment passed the House in 1918, but failed to clear the Senate. So the suffragists continued the protests. The watchfires involved burning copies of Woodrow Wilson's speeches as the empty words that they were. And in February 1919, a trainload of former suffrage prisoners went on a cross-country speaking tour telling of their experiences. By May, a newly elected pro-suffrage majority of Congress would eschew the Susan B. Anthony Amendment past both the House and the Senate with relative ease. The right of citizens of the United States to vote shall not be denied or abridged by the United States or by any state on account of sex. From here, the amendment would need to be ratified by 36 states. Though public sentiment and suffrage was shifting, there was much work left to be done.
Rise, girls, women of the earth, the voiceless and the free, will shout, shout the revolution of women, shout the revolution of women.
Alice Paul raised a toast and unfurled a celebratory banner outside headquarters. She'd been quietly sewing a new star on the banner for each state that ratified the 19th Amendment, and now it was finished. 36 stars, 36 states. In August of 1920, all eyes were on Tennessee, the final state to ratify. In Nashville, freshman legislator Harry Byrne had an anti-suffrage red rose on his lapel, but the letter in his pocket weighed more heavily on his mind. Mrs. J.L. Byrne was a widowed, tax-paying landowner, and when her son Harry cast his vote of aye, the room gave way to confused gasps. Had it really happened? Had women actually won the vote? The room exploded. There was weeping, screaming, and singing. Was the first woman to win the Congressional Medal of Honor. A surgeon and a spy in the Civil War, she wrote, "Nothing but the ballot in women's hand will right these wrongs. But for women of color, the struggle was more complex than this. Having picketed with the Silent Sentinels, Mary Church Terrell wrote, a white woman has only one handicap to overcome, that of sex. I have two, both sex and race." Black suffragists worked hard in their churches and communities, often being ignored by white suffragists and written out of historical records. Frances Ellen Watkins Harper remarked, "I do not believe that giving women the ballot is going to cure all the ills of life. I do not believe that white women are dewdrops just exhaled from the skies. I think that like men, they may be divided into the good, the bad, and the indifferent. The good will vote according to their convictions and principles, and bad as dictated by prejudice or malice, and the indifferent will vote on the strongest side of the question with the winning party."
Lifting as we climb onward and upward we go, struggling and striving and hoping. We knock at the bar of justice, asking for equal chance.
The 19th Amendment was a 72-year struggle, but for women of color, the struggle would continue. Zitkala Sa of Yankton Sioux heritage fought for indigenous Americans to gain citizenship in 1924. The right to vote, however, was decided state by state, with New Mexico and Arizona being the last in 1948. Chinese immigrants would vote in 1943, and for black women repeatedly suppressed at the polls, the poll tax was ended in 1964, and the Voting Rights Act created in 1965. Voters with disabilities were given special protection in 1982. As Carrie Chapman Catt said, "Women have suffered agony of soul which you can never comprehend, that you and your daughters might inherit political freedom. That vote has been costly. Prize it."
Forward out of darkness, leave behind the night. Forward out of terror, forward into light. Forward out of darkness, forward into lifting as we climb.
Thank you. I would like to thank our soloists, Pauline Coder and Diane Lott. And our narrators, Ellen Goldman, Maria Cribbs, Courtney Firth, Leah Herrera-Lasso, and Val Campbell. Now we would like to welcome Chris DeRosa from the League of Women Voters of Virginia. You can read her biography in our program. She's a current board member and will enlighten us on the current issues that the League is working on. Ms. DeRosa.
Good afternoon. Wasn't that fantabulous? So not only was that beautiful, but very inspirational. I am Chris DeRosa. I'm not a board member, but I am a member of the League of Women Voters. I co-chair the redistricting issues group for the League for the past 2 or 3 years. As you know, and as you heard, it's only been about 100 years since women got the right to vote out of 400 years of representative government in the states. And it was decades later when all women of color and men of color were able to vote. And just recently, Virginia became the 38th state to ratify the Equal Rights Amendment. It is close to being in the Constitution, but isn't there yet. So the fight is not over for rights for everyone. We stand on the shoulders of hundreds of women and men who have won the right to vote for all of us. And we should not take that for granted. So as you know, Virginia votes every year. They love elections. So this year on your ballot, you will find races for the U.S. House of Representatives and your local races, county government, school board, etc. There will be a primary in some jurisdictions on June 21st. That would be for, again, the races that I just mentioned. Some political groups are having caucuses or meetings instead. Early voting actually starts in 5 days on May 6th. So if you have an election, primary election in your jurisdiction, you can start voting very soon. Registration will end on May 31st. And if you know anyone who is 17 now but will turn 18 by November 8th, which is general election, they can register now to vote, and they can vote in the primary election. So grab those young people and take them, make sure they register to vote. We try to make voting easy for everyone and accessible. So we will still have ballot boxes. You will still have early voting. You'll have 2 Saturdays when you can vote as well. You don't have to give a reason or excuse for wanting to vote like we used to a few years ago. One thing this year, if you are voting by mail, make sure that you get a witness on your ballot. During the pandemic, that was waived, but now you do need a witness again. And new this year in November will be same-day registration. So people can actually register to vote on the day they vote. But be aware that you will probably be casting a provisional ballot. And so until they verify your qualification to vote, your vote won't be counted. So it's better to register ahead of time. So what's really new this year is we have redistricting. We have new maps, which they do every 10 years. And so the question is, has your district changed? They redrew the maps for Congress and for State Senate and House of Delegates. Now, House of Delegates and Senate will not have races until next year, so you won't be affected by that directly. The lines and boundaries of the district where you live now may have changed. The actual numbers have changed too. The special masters or experts, when drawing the maps, just decided which way to start numbering. So for example, I'm in District 47, House of Delegates, but my new district, even though I can vote for the same delegate, will now be District number 1. So you'll see a lot of changes like that. You will also see some changes for local redistricting. So Fairfax County, for example, Loudoun County changed their district boundaries for the local Board of Supervisors, County Board, and School Board. So you need to check to see who might be on your ballot this year, because it may not be the same names that you're used to seeing from the past. So there are different ways you can check out, and I will mention a couple of places. One is the League of Women Voters has a site called vote411.org. If you enter your address, it'll tell you what districts you live in. And soon, I hope, they will actually post the sample ballots for you to look at. The League also sends questionnaires to all candidates for different races. And if the candidates return those questionnaires, their answers in full will appear on the website. So that's a good way to find out information about your candidates. VPAP is the Virginia, I forgot what this stands for. Okay, anyway, it's a nonprofit, nonpartisan group based in Richmond, but you can also enter your address there and they will show you what your old district looks like, what your new district looks like, and if your representatives will actually change. So I'll be happy to share those websites with you later. And the only thing, well, 2 things left. I mentioned that the House of Delegates race will be next year in 2023. There is one lawsuit in the federal courts right now, and it's not challenging the maps, but it's saying that we should have House of Delegates elections this year in 2022, because when we elected them in November this past year, they were running on the old maps. We're not sure what's going to happen to this lawsuit or how long it's going to take for it to be resolved, but it is possible that they will have to add a House of Delegates election this year. So keep that in mind. And so I want to thank you all for inviting me, and the last thing I want to say is be sure to use your superpower and vote this year and every year. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. Just wanted to welcome everyone here to our festival, and just have to say how wonderful it is to see everybody in person. It's our first concert under a roof, and I'll get to a point where we did do some other concerts, but this is our first festival that's under roof. We did do a festival last year, but it was all pre-recorded and so forth. But I just wanted to welcome everybody. It's really great to see everybody in person. I'm Janice Ware. I am the president of the Capital Harmonia Board of Directors. And I just wanted to take about 5 minutes of your time to just tell you a little bit more about Capital Harmonia and who we are in case you haven't seen us perform before, just to tell you a little about who we are and a little bit about our mission and what we've been up to, especially the last 2 years. Our mission is to, as it says up here, lifting women up through song and service. And for the past 9 years, that has been our mission, and we have provided services across 29 partners, and we have had 65 performances, probably 65 plus now. And our volunteer activities have been in serving the women in song and service, have been in homelessness, domestic violence, women's rights, and racial injustice. Those have been our focuses the last 9 years. And we've performed in a variety of areas, homeless shelters, retirement centers, charity walks, fundraisers, and at conferences. So we volunteer our services also. We do volunteer services, and we collect items for organizations such as Women Giving Back, Bras, and Cornerstone. Now we have as I said, I mentioned we have 29 partners that we've been working with. And here is the list of our partners that we have worked with the last 9 years. Do we have any partners here that that's on the list? Anybody? Yeah? Please stand up. Just wanted to recognize our partners because what they add to our community, what they do for our community every single day. I just want to give them another round of applause because they're there every single day helping others. And I believe that's Elizabeth over there. It's so hard to know who people are with masks on, I have to say. So that's Elizabeth over there. She's with the House of Ruth, and she has been a partner since we started in 2013. So we have been singing for the House of Ruth for 9 years now. And I assume, is this Najan? Okay, sorry. Because I just can't tell with that mask. And she's with Shelter House. She is also a partner. We sang for them in 2018. And so we're honored to be a partner of theirs as well. And so for the last, let's see. So the last 2 years, you can imagine for any chorus, and Capital Harmony was not exempt from this, it's been a little challenging to pursue our mission. And so we did a lot of thinking about what could we do while not being able to perform in front of individuals. And so we did, I think we did an awesome job, and you can thank everyone over here in the chorus of how we moved forward with during the COVID years. We, in 2021, we put together 126 bags of supplies for Cornerstone. There were necessities that they needed. We provided a holiday meal for the House of Ruth, and so that they could enjoy a meal. We provided the funds to do that. We wrote holiday cards for the Potomac Rehab residents and sent them to the residents at the rehab center. And as I mentioned, we created our first virtual festival, which was no small feat, right, Marianne? Lots of hours, lots and lots of hours, dedication from the chorus members as well as Marianne. Probably if you clock the number of hours, it would be an incredible number. So it still is out on our YouTube channel. So if Capital Harmony YouTube channel, if you want to see our festival from last year, it's still out there. And in this past year, and I didn't mention the unlimited number of Zoom rehearsals that also give credit to the chorus and how they stuck with it on Zoom. That is not an easy feat. And so for the 2 years, we did a lot of Zoom rehearsals. And we also, we did our first outdoor performance for the Potomac Rehab Center, and that was a lot of fun. And for the residents there, it was outdoors still, not allowed into the facility, but that was our first performance, I guess, since COVID, and well, during COVID. And we also volunteered at the Women Giving Back, which is a facility where they provide clothing and other necessities for women, and we go there to help sort the clothing or work at the store. So we do a lot of that. We did that during the COVID, once they opened up. And then most recently, we performed the cantata that you just heard. We performed that at Carnegie. And that was just last month, actually. And it was a very exciting moment for a lot of us that sang there. And we helped, Kepler Harmonia, among many other women's choruses, helped commission that piece to be written and by Andrea Ramsey, and it was an honor to actually meet Andrea Ramsey. She was an amazing person to see in person, to hear her whole history of how she came up, how she did all the background research, and how she wrote this piece. So we were able to perform that at Carnegie because we did help commission that piece, and that is something we were very honored to do. And so next, I just want to, and then I'll let you all go for your intermission. I wanted to acknowledge a number of people. One, the person behind me, Mary Ann, who every day, she's our music director, and she dedicates her so many hours to us. Every day she is proving how dedicated she is to this chorus. And she's a co-founder of Kepler Harmonia. And then Ellen Goldman, wherever she, can't see her from here, but she just raised her hand. She also is the co-founder of Kepler Harmonia, and she is always willing to give advice. She was past president, and now she's always willing and able to give advice and provide ideas to move forward. And Rachel Thompson, I give her a round of applause for the cantata. And our amazing accompanist. And our board of directors, I won't go through it name by name, but thank you to the board of directors who remain dedicated. Every day, even though they have day jobs, they're always there and helping with that, with keeping Kepler Harmonia moving forward, and just thanking the chorus members and their dedication to coming to rehearsal every Wednesday night, and also rehearsing at home, you can tell. So, but thank you to everyone. And then I also want to thank all of you for being here. We really appreciate you coming to see our performance, and we are just very honored to have you here. I know it was raining when you came here, and taking your time out of your Sunday. One of the things I wanted to mention before I let you go is also, we also would like to see if you would consider contributing to Kepler Harmonia. We do not charge for our performances ever. We sometimes take a contribution if it's offered, but we do not charge. And the only way we raise money is this fundraiser, and we do have expenses that we have to cover every year, which is our rental space, stipends for our accompanist and our music director, and just miscellaneous administrative stuff. It's not a huge budget, but it is. We do have to cover that. So if we'd like to ask if you wouldn't mind and consider donating to Kepler Harmonia. And I also have a challenge for you. The awesome choir, they have already donated or have committed to over $1,200 towards our fund already. And now they want to challenge you to see if you can meet that amount or exceed it. So we really appreciate it. That's the challenge that that the choir that puts out to you. And that's pretty. You have a question?
I have a sneaking suspicion that the person who's talking right now probably deserves some recognition.
Okay, so with that, I need to tell you if you're going to donate, if you wish to donate to Kepler Harmonia. There will be tables out here, and people happy to take a cash check or we do have the swipey things, whatever they're called, for a credit card. Another way is, if you don't want to take the time now to donate, you can also go to our website, www.keplerharmonia.org, to donate on that site as well. So feel free to do that. So I really, we all appreciate you being here again, and thank you.
So you can donate out in the narthex here. We'll take about a 10-minute intermission to allow you to do that, and then we have a wonderful second half featuring some other guest musicians. Thank you. if anyone else is looking to donate. Otherwise, we will be starting back in about 3 minutes. Thank you for your generosity. The second half of our program will explore the varied experiences of women. Finish this sentence. I am. Anyone want to jump in? I am. Mother. Father. Woman, widow, wife. We are many things. She sat at the back, and they said she was shy. She led from the front, and they hated her pride. They asked her advice, and then questioned her guidance. They branded her loud, then were shocked by her silence. When she shared no ambition, they said it was sad. So she told them her dreams, and they said she was mad. They told her they'd listen, then covered their ears, and gave her a hug while they laughed at her fears. And she listened to all of it, thinking she could be the girl they told her to be the best as she could. But one day she asked what was best for herself, instead of trying to please everyone else. So she walked to the forest and stood with the trees. She heard the wind whisper and danced with the leaves. She spoke to the willow, the elm, and the pine, and she told them what she'd been told time after time. She told them she felt she was never enough. She was either too little or far, far too much. Too loud or too quiet, too fierce or too weak. Too wise or too foolish, too bold or too meek. Then she found a small clearing surrounded by firs, and she stopped, and she heard what the trees said to her. And she sat there for hours, not wanting to leave, for the forest said nothing. It just let her breathe. Becky Helmsley.
May Earl Wine, also known as Daisy May, was born into a musical family in 1982 in Big Rapids, Michigan. After being homeschooled, she hitchhiked across North America, riding freight trains, singing and performing on guitar, piano, and violin on the streets and on festival stages. Now, with 15 albums to her credit, May carries the torch of folk singer activist. She has used her voice to encourage environmental advocacy, social justice, creative empowerment, and community building. Her works have been featured in Rolling Stone magazine, on Prairie Home Companion, and on The Voice. The piece we are about to perform, Never One Thing, was inspired by the line, "I am large, I contain multitudes," from Walt Whitman's Song of Myself. Earl Wine described what the line meant to her as follows. "It came to me as a desperate plea and cry to be free from societal confines, and also free from the pain of our internal critic. To be strong, to be powerful, to be angry, to be a fighter. These are not things women are often encouraged to identify with."
beggar, I am the queen, I am the egg, I am the means, I am the hammer, I am the wall, never one thing, no, not one thing at all.
I am a mother, I am the child, I am the meek, I am the wild, I am the witch, I am the saint, I am alive, never one thing.
Finding Her Here by Jane Relaford Brown. I am becoming the woman I've wanted, gray at the temples, soft body, delighted, cracked up by life with a laugh that's known bitter, but past it got better, knows she's a survivor, that whatever comes she can outlast it. I am becoming a deep, weathered basket. I'm becoming the woman I've longed for, the motherly lover with arms strong and tender, the growing up daughter who blushed surprises. I'm becoming full moons and sunrises. I find her becoming this woman I've wanted, who knows she'll encompass, who knows she's sufficient, who knows where she's going and travels with passion, who remembers she's precious, but knows she's not scarce, who knows she is plenty, plenty to share.
I am becoming the woman I've wanted.
Imagine finally escaping from Egypt after generations of captivity and enslavement, only to be met by the Red Sea. The Egyptian army is after you. Do you dare step into the sea? Will it sweep you away? Miriam, the sister of Moses, is said to have sung after the Israelites made it to the other side of the water. However, this song of Miriam is that of having to decide to take that first step. Rabbi Ruth Sohn captured this moment in Old Testament history with her poem. Here is a very small excerpt of what you will hear. I, Miriam, stand at the sea and turn to face the desert, stretching endless and still. In a moment of panic, my eyes go blind. Can I take the first step without knowing the destination? One Work was originally written by James Taylor for the Stephen Schwartz Broadway musical Working. The song tells the story of a young woman in the 1800s who was forced to work in a textile mill to support her 3 children after the death of her troubled husband. In the midst of her difficult life and work, she daydreams about her father's smile and her grandfather's stories, while she realizes that she is chained to her life by her machine. She sings, "Then it's me and my machine for the rest of the morning, the rest of the afternoon, and the rest of my life."
Holly Near was born in 1949 in Ukiah, California, and raised there on a ranch. 3 of the 4 Near sisters became musicians. Holly has been writing and performing songs about change all over the world for over 50 years, releasing her 31st album in 2018. She is described as one of the most powerful, consistent, and outspoken singers and songwriters of our time. Her music elevates spirits and inspires activism. Since witnessing firsthand during a tour in Vietnam in the early 1970s how war and poverty affects the least powerful, she has been a voice for women, farm workers, gay people, immigrants, and others in need of compassion. She founded one of the first women-owned record companies in 1972, paving the way for others in the industry. This next piece, Change of Heart, is about how we inspire each other to change through our ordinary actions and solidarity. It gives expression to Holly's mission of not separating her music from her heart, nor separating her ideas from her daily life. Holly shares, "It is from this personal place that I write my songs."
Composer Zachary J. Moore says, "Well, after a year and a half of searching, I rediscovered Georgia Douglas Johnson's poetry. This time, I found her poems When I Rise Up and Your World paired together. Despite the journey being extensive and difficult, I did discover some amazing information about her. First of all, she was an African American woman who was published in the 1920s. That fact alone should amaze anyone. She was a strong advocate for women's rights and often shared her own opinions in her writing, which spoke of love, loneliness, and life's disappointments. The fact that she created When I Rise Up at the beginning of her life and Your World at the end of her life speaks of hope for all of us. Her journey can serve as a beacon of hope for all of us. We all can rise and grow into something beyond our own imagination. Stand for what you believe in and be yourself."
When I rise up above the air and I look down on the
thank you for joining us today in person and on YouTube. I would like to thank our soloists for this half of the program, Jennifer Winstead, Val Campbell, Kelly Hood, and Diane Lott. I would also like to thank our instrumentalists today, Michael Holmes on cajon and Alfonso Sanchez on bass. And we would not be able to prepare or perform without our amazing pianist, Rachel Thompson. And if we paid her by the note, we'd all be broke today, because she played a lot of them. We hope our music has educated and motivated you to think about the experiences of women. And so I leave you with an excerpt from Dr. Maya Angelou's poem, Phenomenal Woman. Pretty woman, wonder where my secret lies. I'm not cute or built to suit a fashion model's size. But when I start to tell them, they think I'm telling lies. I say, it's in the reach of my arms, the span of my hips, the stride of my step, and the curl of my lips. I am a woman, phenomenal woman. That's me. Thank you. And I do have one more very brief request. If there's anybody who can help us reset this stage, as it were, we have a food pantry, a food ministry that we do here, and we set up on Mondays. So we would really appreciate some help getting the piano back in the corner and some chairs back in the front row. I would really appreciate it. Thank you so much.